Da 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 da. Hi everybody. So this is the second video that we're going to do involving modeling. So last week you learned how Maya works from a basic standpoint, and now we're going to learn how to take the tools that you've been working with Maya and build complex objects. Obviously, the objects that we're going to build first are not going to be the most complex, but they're going to be the simple side of complex. As an example, we're going to take this cube and turn it to this object right here. Now, the interesting thing to note about this is that last week you learned how to make objects, and your homework was to stack them together to make objects that have more detail to them. The big difference here is that we're actually cutting into this object to build this one here. You can notice it if you look at these little green lines around it, that it has a wireframe. That's what we call these green lines around here. And that wireframe actually dictates what the outside shape looks like. You can actually see along these objects here, they have something very similar to their wireframe, and these shapes are actually made out of using the text generator on this particular thing here. They're made out of a bunch of smaller pieces. So now that we know how to do this, the big question is what to do, how to use it. Well, two things first. First and foremost, I'm going to take what I have just as a review, and I'm going to make a layer real quick, and I'm going to put these objects into layer by making sure I select everything, and then going to layer 1, add selected objects. And there we go. We'll put those in there, title card clips. Make sure they're in there, add selected objects, and now we should be able to turn it off. Cool. So, as I was saying before, the first thing that we need to focus on is understanding what you actually have at your disposal when dealing with an object. So the first thing we should do is pick up a basic polygon. I'm going to get a cube here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to hit the F key to focus in on it. Now this is what we call an object, and as it is an object, it has different modes that you can use to select the different parts of that object. Right now we're in object mode. Object mode appears when you have this green line that appears over your work, and as long as you have that green line, you can always remember you are in object mode. Now, in addition to that, if you right click with your mouse, you'll notice that you have a few different modes that pop up. You have an edge mode, a vertex mode, a face mode, and an object mode. And each of these different modes make it so it's easier for you to figure out how you want to manipulate your object. When I say manipulate your object, what I'm referring to is using, if I go over here, using these tools on the side to click and select different parts of this surface and manipulate them as you see fit. Very simple tools that you can use can make it so you can do a lot of crazy things to a cube. As an example, I'm going to hold the right click button down, and I'm going to move into the face tool, just as so. Now that I'm on the face tool, I'm going to click one side of this object. If you notice, as I move my cursor around, different parts of the cube actually highlight. These are the selections that you can possibly make. Once you start selecting the pieces of an object, you're able to pick different parts and select the ones you want. So now I can grab this face, and using the tools I learned how to use last week, move, rotate, scale, I can move things up, I can move things down. I can also, if I want to, rotate things inward and outward. And the important thing to pay attention to is that this is actually changing the shape of the object as we go, which is really useful for what we want to do. Now, we're in face mode at the moment. There's also an edge mode. Edge mode are these little tiny edges that you see in blue. This is what makes up your wireframe. This is what makes up the structure of your object. And if you move that edge, it changes the shape that way as well. So it's probably a good rule of thumb for yourself to always remember that you can manipulate objects in 3 different ways: faces, edges, and vertices, which are these right here. Up and down, I can move them. As you can see, everything is working pretty cool. And we're good. All right, so now that you know how to use those, it's easy for you to build new objects and manipulate objects to form new shapes just by moving these pieces around. You can select pieces, move them out however you need. And if we go back into object mode, our wireframe will disappear. And it makes it easier for us to look at our object and see it from different angles, just like this. So everything is good. Everything is awesome. All right. So now that we have this, I'm going to delete this object. And I'm going to get a new cube for you to work with. So create polygon primitives cube. And now we need to learn some tools that we can use. There's a few tools that we have at our disposal that we're going to grab and add to a custom toolbar. If you look at your shelf up here, there's a bunch of different settings. You start off with polygons, you can go up to curves and a bunch of other things. What we're going to do is make some custom items here. And the best way to make those custom items is to go up here at the top of your menu and figure out what you actually need. Now, you're going to get some information from me, and I know that you have it, but as a refresher, at this point, the ones that are most important for you are extrude, center pivot, and basic cube. So at the very least, if we can make those three, it'll be easy for us to make the other ones in a little bit. So I'm going to go up here to create polygon primitives, and I'm going to highlight cube. And what I'm going to do is hold Control and Shift, and I'm going to click the button. And if you notice, oops, sorry, I hit cylinder. I'm in a car, so I accidentally clicked the wrong one. But if you notice, when you hit Control, hold Control down and Shift, it takes that menu option and it puts it up here for you. So in addition to having those cool shelves that you made before, you're able to make your own custom options and use those as well. So I'm going to go up to Modify and Center Pivot, Control Shift, click, Center Pivot shows up. Then I'm going to go to Edit Mesh. I'm going to find Extrude right here where it says Components, Control Shift, click. And when I say click, I don't mean click the button down on your mouse. I mean let go of the button because it'll automatically do that little clicking thing. And so now we're going to have some basic tools that we can use. If you want to, you could have the merge tool and a few others. But since we're working with basics, I think the other one that's going to be super useful for us is multi-cut, which is here. And I believe now that we have these particular ones, we're good. If you're working and you feel like you might need any extra ones, this is an option just for cleanup purposes. I don't think our next project is going to be so detailed that you're going to need this. But if you need to, go to Edit, Delete by Type, and select History, Control Shift click, and have that up there as well. And so now you should have a collection of tools for you to use. You have the sphere, which was an accident by me. You probably don't have that one. But you do have the cube, center pivot, extrude, multi-cut, and history. Now, next part that we're going to show is actually going to get into what those do and how they affect this object here. Now, I told you last week that your channel box allows you to modify the history of your object. So as an example with this, I'm able to go into my inputs over here and change the size as well as the number of edges on each side. For this object, subdivision's width will change if I hit 2. Take a look at the cube over here. Now look, if I hit 2, if you notice, it'll make an extra edge in there. So it takes the width of this object and divides it into 2 separate sections. That's what this subdivision's width means. How many divides do you want in it? Height refers to it going top to bottom. So if I want some extra divisions in it, I can hit this and maybe type 3, and it's going to cut this face around this side. 1, 2, 3, and it's going to make 3 separate sections of it. So if I hit enter, those 3 sections appear. This is really useful for starting out an object. At the end, I'm going to show you how to make a basic chair, how to make it pretty quickly and efficiently using these particular tools, so you can start an object exactly the way that you want. So that's that. Now, if we go back here, now that we know how to make an object, let's edit this object. Sometimes you want to cut into an object a certain way. That's what your multi-cut tool is for. Your multi-cut tool is actually 3 tools in one that lets you cut your object in different ways. So as an example, the first one you have is a laser cutter. Basically, whatever it does is, as long as you're looking at your object, you click with the mouse, you drag it across, it's going to make a cut in that direction, just as if you took like a super sharp knife or a sword or something like that and just slashed it across the screen. Cool, we are good. All right, so as I was saying before, this multi-cut tool is incredibly useful. So the next one that we have is our insert edge loop tool, which is a consolidation of this tool here. They actually took this tool and put it inside the multi-cut tool, so you're able to use it very quickly. If you hold down the control key, you'll notice that a yellow window around your object pops up, and it pops up wrapping your entire object. Basically what this does is create a brand new edge around your entire object that fits the shape wherever you click it, like so. This is incredibly useful when you want to build very even edges and have them wrap around and connect naturally. Super useful, it's super awesome. And if you're ever like modeling characters or trying to model something that's symmetrical or something like that, it's super useful, really easy to do, and it helps a lot. So I'm going to make a couple extra cuts just to show you. An interesting thing is that it will fit the shape of whatever you cut before. So please notice that like I had that original diagonal cut, which is right here. This diagonal cut that you see here, going all the way across my object, is doing its own thing. And because it's doing its own thing, it becomes a lot easier for you to make additional cuts that kind of fit the form. So what we call this is that we're working inside of an edge loop, and that's what these things actually are. So once they're working inside an edge loop, everything's good. The last tool that you have is really simple. If you just click on a point and then click again, you can cut by just clicking from one area to the next. This isn't necessarily as useful unless you're trying to cut something very specific out. So you just use this to cut around the object as much as you want, and then when you get done, you can hit enter and all those edges go in there. Very messy, unless like you're doing precise cuts. This is for like absolute precision if there's something specific that you need. But now that we have all these different cuts, there's some things that are important to think about. One of them is making sure that when you're selecting things, you see and pick objects quickly that fit the kind of things that you're going to make. So as an example, when I'm actually looking at this object here, if I want to select the inside and make the inside of the object smaller, remember that you are allowed to operate between any polygon in any collection of polygons. And if all the polygons and all the edges of those polygons connect in a single loop, you're able to select what's called an edge ring. So as an example, I'm going to right click and go into edge mode, and I'm going to double click this edge right here. And if you notice, I'll zoom in so you can see it. This edge actually shows up all around the object here, minus like the place I didn't cut it. But yeah, this edge shows up, edge shows up, edge shows up here. So this is what we call an edge loop. There's another edge loop on this side. So I can select both of these edge loops if I wanted to and manipulate my object based on that. And if you notice, it'll pull those two edges together, which makes it easier for me to move this object in any way I see fit. Another thing I can do, like I said before, is select the edge ring. So if you ever want to select the space between two edge loops, what you can do is go to face mode, click off the object, click once on a face, then hold shift and double click the face next to it, or what we like to call the adjacent face, and it'll go ahead and keep clicking everything else that's connected around it until you get that edge ring. Now this is incredibly useful when you have a specific shape. But if you notice, it moves the same area as it did when I selected the edges too. That's because there's more than one way to click objects. You really just, when you're working and you're modeling, your beginning time modeling is figuring out a methodology that works best for you. If you figure out a methodology that works best for you and is pretty efficient, you're able to model things very quickly. Now, the next tool that I want to show you is something that's incredibly useful, and we're going to use this edge ring that I selected as a nice example for it. So again, I'm going to click one section and I'm going to double click the rest of it so the edge ring pops up. There we go. Edge ring's there. And I'm going to hit this tool, which is Extrude. Now, I've shown you like where these tools are, but as a refresher, the multi-cut tool is under Mesh Tools right here, where we have multi-cut, and then the Extrude is under Edit Mesh because we're actually working with the mesh itself. The big difference between Edit Mesh and Mesh Tools is that Mesh Tools are tools for cutting on your surface or like manipulating your surface. Edit Mesh will mess with the surface directly. So if I go down here and I hit Extrude, if you notice, the cursor down here has changed. The cursor has changed, and now you see that it's giving you some options to select. You can move your object on the Y, the X, and the Z axis. Now, the important thing to remember for this is that your extrusion tool is working based on the orientation of your object itself. So it's the same thing as if like you have something that's growing directly from the surface of it. So oftentimes, if you're going to extrude something, you want to extrude something straight out, you'll use this blue, dark blue Z-axis tool. And if you notice, when I pull it out, it's actually pulling out all the faces directly upward, which is really useful. If I actually click it, go in, I actually make it smaller now, and I can make this object more complex. What we're really doing when we're adding complexity to objects is just using extrude, multi-cut multiple times in different ways so we can get exactly the object we want, just like this. Extrude is super useful. You can actually use it for something like this tool here, or this little section here. I can go into face mode, click this, hit the extrude button. Remember, I made this extrude button by holding Control and Shift and clicking after selecting extrude, so I can select it here quickly. I can use this extrude tool to pull out a little appendage, or to push in an appendage as well, or pull out an appendage, pull it down or pull it up as I see fit. This makes it really easy for you to do multiple ones. Now, there's something very important that I want to give you as a little note. If you look down on your keyboard and you hit the G key, you're able to repeat the last button press you did. So you can do the same thing over and over again. So hypothetically speaking, let's say I want to extrude a bunch of stuff on an object. I can hit the G key after I extruded once, extrude again, click on another surface, hit the G key again, extrude, hit the G key again, and I can extrude a different way. There we go. G key, extrude, G key, extrude, just like so. You can also, with the extrusion tool, select multiple things and extrude them all together. Which can make it very easy to make like complex objects very quickly. I don't know what this contraption is, but I'm proud of it. All right, so now that we've done this, the next thing that's really important for you to consider that we're working on is our center pivot tool. So to show you what this is, I'm going to duplicate this object real quick. So let's say I make one of these, and I'm really proud of it, and I want to make another one. I'm going to hit the duplicate button. I'm going to move it over here, so I have a second one. And I'll hit the duplicate button, and I'll grab this object, move it over here, maybe rotate it a little bit to make a third one. So now I got a bunch of objects. We talked about grouping in class, and I know you understand how to do it, but one of the things that I'm going to do to help you is give you just a short reminder that there is a tool that lets you adjust this cursor that shows up in an object. The cursor that is in the middle of this object is what we call a manipulator. And if you click that manipulator, it manipulates the object. So what I want to do is select all three of these objects in object mode, and then I'm going to hit Command G. And Command G is going to make it so these objects become considered one group. The same tool can actually be found under Edit, Hierarchy, Group. So when I hit Command G, just like this, it takes all three of those objects, and you see items group successfully appear in the corner. But the problem is that the cursor, what's considered the center of this object, is off-center to these three here. If I go on my outliner, I can look and my group is here. I can still select the objects individually, but that group is a little bit hard to find. So the best way for us to modify this is to adjust where the pivot point or our manipulator is. So if we go to Modify and click Center Pivot, it'll actually put it in the center of whatever objects we click. Shift select these, hit up to select the group, and I'll click the Center Pivot button. And now that pivot point or that manipulator is in the center of our object. So now if we want to rotate these objects, we can rotate them from the actual realistic center of it. How does Maya know where the center is? Math and art working together. Science! So yeah, so this is what we currently have for this. So now we know how to group objects. We know how to use things. One of the things that's important to consider is that, we've made these different objects. For the sake of this tutorial, I haven't named everything, but I'm going to go ahead and name them here. So I'm going to mouse over here so you can see object 1, right? Okay, let's go back over here. Object 2. And object 3. So we have 3 different objects, and they're all named differently. So these objects with their different names, if you notice in the channel box on the right side of the screen, only object 1 has a collection of experiences called inputs that has defined its history. Now, if you remember correctly, I told you that these inputs basically work like time travel. It tells you the history of the object, how it's been made, everything that's been done to it, and you see like there's been some modifications to the way that the faces look, which is tweak, and then we've also see a bunch of extrude face, which are these little steps that we've taken. Now we can modify these, but at some point, you're going to be messing with an object so much that you're not going to need this history anymore. There's 2 ways to get rid of the history. The first one is to delete the object. Duplicate the object, move it to the side, and then just use that one. But the problem with that is sometimes you want to work from the center orientation right here. So instead of that, maybe it might be better to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. What that'll do is clear all that information down there. I'll show you real quick. Let me move this over a little bit just so you can see it next to everything that's here. All right, so I'm going to zoom in, and we're down here where we were. We're going to go up to, this is delete history, the shortcut we created. Edit, delete by type, history. And now it's gone. We won't see it anymore. I promise there was not like a little person or something off screen that like removed it. We just clicked the button and it disappeared. And now this object is nice and clean, but we also can't go back. We can't go back in history and change the way that this object is unless we hit undo and bring that history back. So this object now believes that this is just how it looked like when it was born. It just came out looking like a jumbled mess of I don't know what. All right, So now that we have this, you're able to edit things, you're able to move things, you know how these basic tools up here work. And something important to remember, like I said before, is that these tools that we use always will create new faces. So now all of these faces of this object that we built are completely different and selectable. We've also created new edges. All the edges are here. And we've also created new vertices, which are all here. And all of those can be edited and manipulated however we see fit. They always light up when you select them, and they always light up in different ways. There you go. Okay, so how do you use all of this in like an actual practical practice to make something that you're trying to build? Well, I'm going to delete these, and we're going to build a chair. I'm going to use this as an example to show you how to build one. And as I told you in class, we're going to have on Wednesday a little moment where we take a few minutes and I see how quickly everybody can build like a simple, short object for yourself. A chair is always the nice kind of benchmark to test your modeling skills because it can be built 100,000 different ways, and it's one of the most simple, efficient techniques. This is like learning how to draw basic shapes in 3D forms in 2D artwork. So I'm going to create a polygon primitive to start. We are officially starting to build a chair. I've created this polygon primitive, and when you're building something, if we're talking modeling philosophy, one of the things you want to think about is where do the different parts of this object come from? So if I turn this back on, I'm going to move this out the way. And we're going to look at the version that's here. We know that a chair has 4 legs and it has a backing often, so we can rest our back on it. These objects are made for the sake of function, and so we're trying to find a functional way to design this object. We know that we're going to need legs, and those legs are going to need edges, and those edges are going to create faces. So what we're going to do, I'm going to set this to reference so we can look at it over time. I'm going to grab this face right here, and we are going to go inside our inputs, and we're going to add a couple divisions of width, 3 here, and we're going to add depth right here, like so. And if you notice now, there's 2 edges going across every side and intersecting at the top. This is good. I'm going to grab my scale tool and I'm going to scale it down, and this is going to become the base for us to build our chair. Now, if I want to, I can do some little fancy things here, and I can grab my edge tool and I can double click each of these edges that are positioned parallel to each other. Those are my edge loops. I can select my edge loops, and I can use the scale tool to scale them both at the same time. Since my pivot is in the center, I'm able to pull them out. Same thing for these. Double click here, double click here. There we go. Oh, I had caps lock clicked. My bad. All right, there we go. I think we're good. So I can pull these out to the edge. And now that I'm pulling things out to the edge, it becomes a lot easier for me to be able to select faces. I'm going to select these faces. So, yeah, I'm going to grab these faces right here. I'm going to click on them. And I'm going to go to the tool and I'm going to hit Extrude. I'm going to pull them down just like this. So now we got some legs for our chair made. Now, the other thing that we're going to do is go up here to the top, and we are going to grab these 2 or 3 faces. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to extrude those upward, just like this. And we very easily built a chair. Look at it. Isn't it pretty? All right. So now that we've made a chair, like I've said before, part of art is not just designing something simple, but it's also giving it personality, adding function to it, form, whatever you need. So we need to, for me, I think the artistry of making a chair is in making it look comfortable. And I think the easiest way to make a chair look comfortable is to make a very simple cushion. Which brings me to your render modes. These are different ways that you can view simple objects by clicking certain buttons on the keyboard. Now, the ones in question that I'm going to be showing for this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, if I go up here and I grab a new cube, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to make sure that I hit the 1 key. 1 key is the basic mode. This is how all your polygons really look. Key 2 is wireframe shaded mode. Basically, it shows you the object itself in wireframe mode, but it also shows you what it looks like when it is smooth. Sorry, wireframe and smooth mode is what I was trying to say, which is this right here. The one in the inside is actually smooth mode. This is called smooth preview. What happens is that it'll take your object and it'll create a preview of what it would look like if you made the object more smooth. This is really useful if you ever have a situation like with this chair where you want like certain edges to look smoother than others. So that's what those are. An additional smooth mode, if you hit the 4 key, 4 keys wireframe display. It'll take whatever the mode that you select, which is first the regular mode, just standard low poly mode, smooth mode, and it'll actually show you what those look like. So you can see the wireframe of whatever object you're working with. And 5 is shaded display. Shaded display just turns it back to normal if you turn it from wireframe back to its original form. Those 5 keys are incredibly useful for what we're going to do, because sometimes what we want to do to make very simple, easy to make cushions, we can take this cube and we can scale it down by hitting R, scale it down so small like this, and if we scale it down small just like this, we can hit the 3 key, and if you notice, it turns it into a disc. But maybe we don't want a disc. Maybe we don't want it to be completely round. I can grab my multi-cut tool, hold down Control, grab a couple edges like so, and the next time it smooths that object, it's going to always try to simplify the edges that are there. So if I hit the 3 key now on this object, go back into object mode, now we got this nice rounded padded surface. And I can actually show you, if I go to my edge mode and double click this, that the closer the edges are to the edge of this object, the sharper that object will be. So it can be rounder or sharper. So now we got something that we can actually use as a cushion. I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it down onto our chair, just like so. I'm going to make sure that I scale it down so it fits. There you have it. Basic chair, complete with wonderful, comfy butt cushion. Good to go. Now from here, you can go ham and do whatever you choose. You can make it look however you want. You can do what you'd like to it. Very soon, we're going to talk about shading objects and adding color to them, and it'll work. One last thing that might help you is that if I focus in on this object, remember, this is your pivot point, and we can use modify center pivot to change where this is. You can also hold down the D key on your keyboard. As long as you hold down the D key, you're able to pick up the pivot point and move it from place to place. This is going to come in handy in the near future when we're making multiple objects, because you'll be able to rotate things on axes that are other than the center of that object, just like this. Let me group this object together. Hold down the D key. And there we go. This makes it very easy to change the position of objects, or In this case, rotate, hit the duplicate button, which is Command D. Hit the duplicate button again, rotate. Command D again, rotate. Command D again, rotate. Command D again, rotate. And now we've made a ring of chairs. Just like that. Maybe you also, just for fun, want to work in relation to this beautiful grid that we have here. You want to line things up to it. I'm going to go over to the left side of the screen here. And I'm going to click on my orthographic view. And if you notice, if I look on the top view here, the top view is set up in such a way that we're able to see where this particular object is located. Now, since we're working with this object, maybe I want to snap my viewpoint to certain places, or I want to snap this object to certain places. If I hold down the X key, it'll change the header and the cursor to a circle, and then I can click and grab using the arrows. And if you notice, that center point where the blue dot and the little dot inside of the, the blue circle and the little blue dot inside of the circle appear, it actually shows up and snaps to an edge and another edge on my object, just like so. This can be useful if you're building a bunch of chairs and you want them to be a very set amount of space apart from each other. Like this one, I'm going to make 2 units from here. I'm going to make another one 2 units from this one. So if I zoom back out so I can show you, go back to our standard window. If I rotate my space, you notice that these 3 chairs are actually equally spaced apart from each other. So there are ways for you to make objects and move them in such a way that you can be very precise with the spacing and the organization of anything that you create. Okay, that about does it. Now you have the ability to model whatever object you choose. If you have any other questions or you need any other reminders or anything, please let me know.